Hi there, it's Caroline. Some interesting news came out of Crete recently, although, to be honest, the excavations were started in 2024. That's when it was sort of technically discovered. And they started to excavate last year, and it's ongoing, which means basically what was happening is they were installing something to expand the airport at the capital, Heraklion, and they came across a rather interesting structure. Sits on a hill. It's basically called Mount Papoura, and so it is outside the city. If you've ever traveled to Crete, you would know that airport. And essentially, it's been dated to the Bronze Age, the early part. So we're talking about 3000 BC to about 1700 BC. So this is what we call the pre-palatial period for the Minoans. This is before the fully sort of grand palaces at Knossos and Malia were constructed and lived in. And of course, this is around the time where also, don't forget, the end period of that would have been around the time of the eruption over on Santorini. So it's pre-palatial. That's the term we use. So when they found it, what it looks like, they call it the Labyrinth. So it's not a maze technically. What it is it is a series of about 8 different walls. And imagine that's what it looks like. So it's kind of like a little similar to a ziggurat, if you know the step pyramid in Egypt. Before the pyramids take on that perfect triangular shape, there is what's called a step form. It sort of reduces in size, it shrinks as you go up, okay? Hence the word step. So this is very similar, but it's circular. So each section will shrink in size until you get to the top, and there are 8 levels like that. Each level actually consists of rooms. That's it. So it's not a wall that like a barrow where you go inside, although you do enter. There is one section that consists of 4 rather special rooms where a lot of artifacts were found. So we're talking some sort of ceremonial cultic items. So it may have had a multi-use. It couldn't have just been maybe ritual. And the fact that it was constructed at 3000 BC is the date they're giving based on, of course, the pottery, the ceramic comparison. And you are looking at pottery in the later period of it, which resembles pottery that has come across at Knossos, the site, and Malia. So the same sort of people who were building those great palaces, the Minoans, also seem to be involved with this, but at a slightly earlier stage. So this sort of dictates they feel that you're looking at some kind of clan or tribal leaders already starting to assert themselves and maybe being responsible for the construction of this using their community. All right. So a lot of times with these monuments, you want to look at what is it saying? What's the statement here? And to go back to it, it's quite fascinating because it was made out of stone. That's not too far away. It's not particularly elaborate like the pyramids in Egypt, but it is amazing because it hasn't been found on Crete, this kind of structure really with this shape. So usually you've seen, I've posted videos on Knossos, the site. I actually was there just over in fall. So you can see the difference in the architecture when you look at the palaces and the other buildings, the typical rectangular square. So this is the type of architecture that if you were excavating in Mesopotamia, up in Syria, you will see. It's also very common in Europe. I mentioned the barrows in Ireland. You get a lot of this circular structure that's now been covered in grass, but actually you would enter through an entrance into it, subterranean, okay? And as you get with most of these cultic places, you are crossing a threshold, sort of like what we call, anthropologists call a liminal state, where you are entering another state. Okay, that is what that word means, is somebody who has passed into another state, whether it is through an altered state using hallucinogenics or the whole spiritual cultic experience. So somebody like a priest would be considered a liminal person who regularly crosses that border, okay? So without getting into that, I might do another video on architecture and meaning during the Bronze Age another time. So this is going to be quite interesting to see what they do turn up. And the reason I mentioned the labyrinth term is they've used that term. And if you know your Homer, of course, and your Greek myths, you know about King Minos over in Crete from Knossos, hence the Minotaur from King Minos, the half human, half monster creature that lived inside the labyrinth. And if you know it, if not, the story basically is that every so many years he would request from Athens 12, 12 young people, 6 males, 6 females had to be sacrificed to the Minotaur. And I won't get into the whole reason of what that was, but essentially it was trapped inside this labyrinth and nobody could get out. So there was no escaping until Theseus, with the help of Ariadne and that ball of yarn. So what she suggested was that when he goes in, he unravels the yarn so he's able to follow the yarn to exit. So he did kill the Minotaur, was the hero, managed to escape, and Theseus was a hero. So he always has these adventures, and essentially that's the myth we're talking about. There was a King Minos at Knossos, so it's quite interesting. You do with myths, there is almost always that element of some truth in there. That's what we call a fable, actually, but there is that element. So we know there was a King Minos, hence the Minotaur, and there was Knossos. We know that because Sir Arthur Evans excavated that, and I've talked about that. All right, so this is a new site. It doesn't have a name. It's outside of Heraklion and on Mount Papoura. So it's quite interesting, and I just thought I would talk about that because, once again, showing that these myths often can help us to find actual sites, and they are relevant. So you remember I was talking about Atlantis at one period. Okay, so enjoy your day, and that's about all I have to say for today.